just different.
Every now and then we come to tear it up. You can be anywhere doing anything, but you here with us. Black group therapy, black truth therapy, debated on the regularly in hopes to find a remedy, y'all. We more than friends, we family, y'all. So if I think somebody tripping, I'ma tell them they wrong, cause I know they'll do the same for me no matter the dispute. Black group therapy, live from the loop, huh? Yeah, we coming live from the loop. Black group therapy, live from the loop, huh? Yeah, we coming live from the loop. Black group therapy, live from the loop. Come on. With this episode, what I want to talk about is black equity and what do we as a people mean to this society, and what does a seat at the table actually look like in this society, right? So like, there's been a lot of talk recently, but also historically and like in recent news, right? You see like Jay-Z and Roc Nation just inked this deal with the NFL, and like prior to, like, it was like, oh, y'all need us, we don't need you. But then it's like, here we go, leaving our table to go sit at theirs. And you know, so like, I guess I'll open up the conversation with like, what is it with the whole seat at the table thing, and what does it mean to them? What does it mean to us? What does it mean in general? Anybody want to chime in?
I think what I want to add to what you just said is thinking of like the whole thing that made the whole Jay-Z deal trend even longer was the fact that you have Colin Kaepernick, who has sacrificed wealth for the people, in essence, because he believes so much more in the value of and fighting for the value of our humanity to be seen and recognized, that he would rather, or it's the way that the narrative has been told, is he would rather sacrifice his own financial gain for the greater good of the community, whereas Jay-Z is gaining financially on the backs of the community, you know? So it's like those two different lenses, and I almost want to, like, I look at it and I see a parallel with like a Malcolm X philosophy versus a Martin Luther King Jr. philosophy. Like, are they wrong? Because they all both seem extreme, right? Mm-hmm. And whichever side of the coin you land on, the other side is devaluing in some way, shape, or form, in your view. Mm-hmm. So I guess kind of like looking at it historically, we've had these battles of philosophy, because in Jay-Z's mind, he's doing good for the community. In those who align with the Kaepernick way of thinking, Jay-Z's doing the worst for the community. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, you know, I think like it's always, there's always been like there's always been this divide where you have this percentage of people in our community who say, forget them, we're gonna build our own. Mm-hmm. Boo-boo, right? For us, by us. Mm-hmm. And then you have this, this percentage of the community who say, look, we can't do it without them. You know what I mean? We're in America. We live, we may be a nation, but we're a nation within a nation. And we have, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's like, we need to try to figure out how to, work together with our oppressor to make a better life for our offspring. And it's like, there's always been this divide, and the collision is like, oh, you're a sellout, oh, you're a wishful thinker, you know what I mean? So I think for me, the whole seat at the table concept maybe comes from the whole, of people who believe that we can't obtain the liberties and the liberties and the justices that the liberties and the justices on our own. We have to do it within the system we live in. You know what I mean?
I feel like I see that, but I also feel like there's a disservice in separating the two as like separate ideologies, as in like they're a dichotomy that's warring against each other. Like when in reality, if we're thinking specifically of like the whole Jay-Z NFL thing, Jay's deal would not exist without Colin Kaepernick, and I feel like that repeats itself in other forms of like the quote-unquote struggle, if you want to see it. Like it is always those grassroots people that say that we have to work outside the system that pave the way for the people that are working inside the system, because otherwise you're never going to You're never going to be heard by a system that is built to not hear you, that is built to squash what you think. So I feel like we shouldn't more divide them, but more think of how they work in tandem with each other. And also kind of like, specifically thinking about like the Jay-Z thing though, I feel like he did it partially because it's like it looks good, but more than not, I feel like this is a business deal. I feel like it's way more transactional than it is him making a very heavy statement, because if it were him making a statement, he would have had Colin Kaepernick with him, and that's just the cut and dry for me, at least, how I view that situation.
I feel like it's too soon to like make any calls on that, because people like Jay-Z move on strategy. He has a long history of helping other people and opening doors for other people. So we really don't know what his, what
intentions.
What his intentions are. I feel like because of his history that he's using his platform, using his power to open doors and to set an example for other black millionaires and billionaires to start taking ownership in things like this, like working with I wouldn't even like to say, even though they are our oppressors, it's like they have resources and everything is on a broader scale with them. I would love to see a black-owned NFL whole association. You know what I'm saying? Because we have the spending power to do that. Like, look at all of the projects, whether it's movies or whatever black people want, we spend our money on. We have the most spending power out of any ethnic group in the world. So I feel like we do have the power to do those things. It's just that our oppressors do have resources on a broader scale to make these happen. And at the same time, they do have a foundation laid out already. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's hard to talk about this without talking about capitalism and like how we can reinvent the same thing. I hear that all the time. Like I hear like, oh, well, we need to work outside or whatever. There are like so many people, like so many like grassroots organizations or like grassroots folks who have like built coalitions together, but that's always been like a sacrifice. That's always been them like working outside of like probably disrupting what we see as capitalism. And so if we're like saying, okay, we're making way for people to do the same thing that like what white people are doing, to me that's not revolutionary, that's not transformative at all. Like to me it's like inventing the same system and the same things that we know are oppressive and that are going to push people to the margin. And so like I think it's hard to talk about it without mentioning that like this is a form of like participating in capitalism.
And I feel like at least where we're currently at, it is extremely hard to do that without facing certain
trying to recreate the system
in a variety of ways. It can be a social death. It can be a financial death.
Yeah, we all know that Jay-Z and Beyonce are our favorite capitalists. Like we all know like they are.
I never thought about it.
Like they are.
God damn it!
They are our people. We love Jay-Z and Beyonce. Well, I don't know, fuck Jay-Z, but like we love.
I'm not gonna get into that.
We love. I mean, but we gotta acknowledge fuck Jay-Z. But you know, like yeah. Anyways, we love Beyonce. You know, we love Oprah, but they are our favorite capitalists. And I mean, I feel like he's doing that. Like I feel like he's
But I think-
participating in something that like white people participate in.
But I do think that, like, you know, we, to a certain extent, we have to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's earned it, and we can't say he hasn't, and we have to just see. I mean, even though we know the NFL is definitely a racist institution, right? If he's able to funnel capital from this institution into the black community to help poor and disenfranchised youth and people in general, then he's our brother.
I think that's true, but to Gigi's point, that's literally still working within the structure of capitalism, because you said he's taking capital and bringing it somewhere else.
Okay, I mean,
And I think-
capitalism isn't a European concept. Like,
But the U.S. does work on the European concept of capitalism, though. I mean, specifically, the U.S. concept of capitalism,
capitalism
is kind of like
was
brought
around
it.
way before white people.
I didn't say it wasn't. But I'm just saying the U.S. specifically works off of that construct, and when it did begin, it specifically works on a brutal concept of capitalism, as it's in like hyper-capitalism, as in it's in every facet of our society. So I think Gigi is saying that as long as you're working within that structure, it's going to be really hard to completely disrupt the disenfranchisement that's happening, because capitalism is set up so that, in very, very plain terms, some people are going to win and some people are going to fail. And to your point, you're right. Jay-Z did earn a lot of what he did. Like, he worked hella hard. Like, if we think about where Jay-Z started to where he's at now, it's astronomical.
But I'm not talking about like his financial successes. I'm talking about like his trust. Like, he's earned a lot of trust within the hip hop culture, within the black community. You know what I mean? Based off of the content that of course not his drug dealing raps, right? But like the raps that speak to black entrepreneurship, and not saying, hey, I want a seat at y'all table, but saying, fuck y'all table. I'm about to, you know what I'm saying, buy my own. You know what
How
I'm
is he
saying?
saying fuck the table when he just participates more in the table? Like, you can't be a billionaire without being a genius marketer and also knowing that at some point way down below you, people are suffering. You cannot be you can't be an ambivalent billionaire, because it's impossible to gain that amount of wealth without having some really steep downfalls on the other side. Like, it's just really
What do
hard
you
to
mean?
accomplish
Like
that.
what?
That's
What?
their politics.
What steep downfalls are we like?
I mean, we can think about it in the concept of, okay, Rockaware.
Mm-hmm.
Huge brand, black people love it. I had a Rockaware puffer jacket in the 6th grade. Like, I rocked it.
With the fur.
But with the fur, okay? I made sure we got the one with the fur from Marshalls. But for something, for example, for that to be mass marketed on the scale, for it to be sold at the price it is, we have to use fast labor, which means the people that are profiting, he's profiting off of the wealth from the really poor people that are making this clothing. And that's not directly his fault, but to Gigi's point, that's just literally the capitalist society that we're working in, as in he couldn't have created those products without, quote unquote, playing the rules of capitalism. And it is great to see like a black person winning at it, because that's why he's our favorite. We love it, because at the end of the day, the reality is that we do live in that society. But we also have to take the backside of that and acknowledge that Jay-Z, for all of his efforts and all that good that he might do, he is still participating in a structure that kind of fucks the rest of us over.
So I got a question. Before we go deeper into this whole seat at the table conversation, and anybody can answer this, what is it that we actually want out of, the society that we're not currently getting? Has anybody thought about that?
I think we want a new society.
So what does a new society look like to you, or?
I think it's hard to say, because realistically, it's not going to happen in this century, because that's just the fact of like revolutionary work. You do it knowing that your generation's not going to see it. But like, for me, I think for that to happen, you would have to figure out a way to dismantle capitalism and dismantle the way we see the hierarchy of power, because those two things are so closely tied to white supremacy that you can't take down white supremacy without disrupting the two systems that it feeds off on most. So I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I do know that like those are some of the building blocks, steps that we'd have to take to get there.
Does anybody agree with that, or Sylvia, what do you think?
I actually Agree. I do agree. And I'm glad that you asked that question, because my question behind that was really, what do we do, like, to get beyond it, or to get past it, or to build this new society? Is it like what you said, for us, by us? Like, do we start one by one? Do we start community by community, city by city? How do we start that in order to start dismantling or breaking that system down and building our own?
Let's talk about history, right? And when I talked to Labo and we decided to do this topic, it just really, when we got off the phone and I just really thought about it, I was like, man, like, historically, we've had a lot of leaders have a seat at the table. Like, I think arguably you could say, like, Dr. King had a seat at the table. You know what I mean? Shit, you can even say Malcolm X had a seat at the table. You know what I mean? But, like,
we have a seat at the table without really being executed.
maybe that's a catch-22.
He definitely went to jail.
But, like,
I don't know.
but still though, can you really say that? Like what? That's why I asked before that. I was like, what does a seat at the table actually look like? Because ain't nobody say it's gonna be pretty. It's like, yeah, nigga, we giving you access to our media platforms. Them niggas was always on TV. Is that what a seat at the table look like? Nigga, we giving you access to the country. But we're gonna lock your ass up. You know what I'm saying?
We're giving you access with parameters of what you may communicate to the scope of the access that we've given you. So it's not really access. It's like it's controlled access.
Is that what a seat at the table is?
No.
I feel like to your
Then what is it?
I feel like in your examples, then we can say that Dr. King and X weren't even at the table. Because if you can't make it to the table alive, then there's a problem there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's hard to ask. I also feel like...
Has anyone, and anybody out there can answer, but like, has there ever been a black person who's legitimately had a seat at the table? Is Oprah? It might be Oprah. And you gotta whisper it.
You gotta whisper it.
Oprah has power. She has her own network. She has the spending power. She has the platform.
Mm-hmm. But what is the cost?
And did she get that by having a seat at the table?
I mean, it's kind of fucked up, but in some ways she did, because Oprah wouldn't be where she's at if white people didn't love her so much. Because it's kind of weird. Like, I feel like I repeat that a lot. Like, once I've, like, for example, Lizzo. I've been following Lizzo forever, like most of us have. And then I feel like all of my friends had that same moment of like, oh, white people like her now, so she's about to blow up. And it happens every time.
Cardi B.
Yeah, good example.
Khalid, let me tell you something about Khalid. So, Khalid, okay, at iHeart we have these like intimate performances and stuff like that for artists. Some that's like, I wouldn't say up and coming, but they there, but they not like mainstream for real. So, I remember when Khalid came on behalf of GCI, it was empty. Like, our promotions team came and got us out of our studios to tell us to come to the audience to support him for an interview. So when he started blowing up, he had another one on behalf of Kiss FM. I go into the room, all white people. It was like packed full of white people.
But is that's just like because
That was
white
months
people
later,
are the
like,
majority, right? So if we live in a capitalistic society, is it more so a race thing, or the fact that like, hey, the majority is this culture? So when you play into the majority,
who's gonna support and spend that money on
right?
what they
You see what I'm saying? So what is it really? And this
Lil
is
Nas X.
Marketing genius.
I don't know, Labo, what you think? No.
I think there's privileges. I think certain people in certain ways have privilege and are able to move around. Like, we all move around differently in this world, and some people are able to move around more easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, like, I do think that certain people, because of, like, you know, because of the system, because of, like, the way the system works, it's like, if you have money, you have privilege. If you are a man, you have privilege. If you, like, have certain, like, even if you have, like, certain access to certain people who are able to connect you, that is in some way or form, in way, shape, or form, like, privilege. And so, like, I do think that we are able to, you know, we do have privileges, but also, like, I don't know if that is what a seat at the table is. I don't know. But I think what everyone's naming is, like, are, like, forms of privilege and forms of, like, being able to, like,
So
get
what
around.
is a seat at the table?
Yeah.
This is my hope of what a seat at the table is. This is not me saying what I think it actually is, but this is what I hope it is. For me, I think a seat at the table is having access to a community or a group of people who you can then influence or utilize as a resource to benefit your community and your group of people that you represent. So when I look at, like, the Jay-Z Rock Nation NFL deal, I would label this as him having a seat at the table, but then I would also say I hope that he's going to utilize that to benefit the greater African American community, right? And only time will tell, right? So that's what I would like for a seat at the table to mean, but I believe that history tells us that a seat at the table is really black. I'm not even going to call them black leaders. I'm gonna call them black influencers being used to promote or establish white agendas. That's what I think having a seat at the table has been for the past century. You know what I mean? Because, like, one thing that we can't say is that we have not had black leadership and black influencers who have had strong relationships with white, powerful people. But that shit has, like, almost always never really turned over into black people doing better. You know what I'm saying? It's been a lot of surface level progression, right? Like, even with the Jay-Z Rock Nation deal, it's kind of like, I'm for it because Jay-Z is honestly my favorite rapper. So, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, so I offended you when I said
not
that?
at all. Like, he ain't my daddy, you know what I'm saying? But, like, where was I? I was talking about, like, how, like, I've never seen it really mean. I've never seen any celebrity really do some shit that really meant some shit. And, like, all those celebrities that really tried to do some shit that really meant some shit died.
Right. So then I guess my question is, can you have a seat at the table without playing to the restrictions that whiteness imposes on you? Because I don't know if black people have ever really authentically had a seat at the table where their voice and their smarts and their wisdom and their intuition was fully valued in the way that it should be valued.
And this is
right?
why I agree with you. because that is not how you get to the table.
Right, you gotta
That
play
is the
game.
first thing that will make them reject.
But this is what I'm saying is a seat at the table. Is it defined by being able to sit at a table with a bunch of powerful white people? Is that really what defines a seat at the table? Or is a seat at the table defined by revolutionaries like the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X? Does a seat at the table look like being able to comfortably live a life where you don't have the fear of being assassinated? Or does it look like literally placing your body on the line for the greater good of humanity, aka Nipsey Hussle?
Anybody want to speak on that?
It's hard to say because on one hand it's like, for me, I view the seat at the table as not like entering a literal space, but more of just like having a voice to what some of the people have said that's like loud enough and strong enough that like other people cannot help but listen. And I feel like at least where we're currently at, it is extremely hard to do that without facing certain death in a variety of ways. It can be a social death. It can be a financial death, because as much as I hate capitalism, we all need money because I like paying rent.
Yeah.
But like that death is going to happen because until we dismantle this system, it's kind of inevitable in a weird way. But that's also really fatalistic and sad. So.
Do we really want to dismantle capitalism, or do we want to kind of make the shit fair, I guess?
Capitalism, by definition, cannot be fair.
This is a fact.
Like, it just can't.
So do you, but
Especially,
you,
like, in the
okay,
US,
but it's
capitalism was
always
born in
low key been
slavery.
around though, right? Like even in like past Egypt, right? There was some form of like, yo, you have the people up here and you have the people down here, and the people up here cannot exist without the people down here suffering and creating shit for them to, you know, capitalize off of. So I did a Google search, right, one day, and I was like, what? And I just Google searched like, what other species outside of the human being oppresses other species, right? And it was like this, I forgot the name of them, but they were like these kind of ants that like were bigger than these other ants, and they would come in and they would like straight up like enslave the other fucking ants, had them carrying their little sandballs and shit. And I was like, damn, like, so, huh?
I said A Bug's Life got dark.
Yeah, that shit was crazy. But like these motherfuckers really do that shit. So like, you know how they say like certain certain animals like do shit, and it's just like that's their nature. So like, is oppression one of the natures of human beings?
I mean, it
And
is,
that's
but
heavy.
because we're human beings, we have the privilege of self-awareness. Like, you don't have to be oppressive. Like, I think it's in human nature to be shitty because humans are kind of terrible.
Basically.
But we have brains that, like, can be aware of that and change those behaviors. So it's almost like you don't get to say it's just because of our nature, so we just get to keep on doing it. It's like,
I mean, we can't stop it. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
But you, like, first of all, we can't talk about capitalism within the U.S., within a American context. Like, we can't talk about capitalism without talking about race, because they are, like, hand in hand. They are intertwined. And so when race is in the equation, these are people, racism is not innate. Racism is, we all know that racism had to have been formed for this system to work. And so it's like, we can talk about like people enslaving other people. There wasn't a construct of race when that happened. We could talk about, like, to me that sounds like
but
the
this
same,
system existed before racism.
but to me that sounds
like
like
white people
the
oppressed
same thing
other
of
white
like
people.
slavery existed before. Like, slavery existed in other countries, whatever. But that's not an excuse for it. That is like, to me, it's like this idea, this understanding, this theory of racial capitalism is so deep. It's so deep to where we, like you said, we have brains. Like, we know that there had to have been some sort of justification for this nasty, dirty thing to happen within the U.S. and for it to be so embedded. And so it has to be done away with. Like, it has to be done away with, because it's not going to get any of us free. If we're talking about going, like, a seat at the table, I don't want to know what white people got to do to get there. Like, I mean, I know they have privilege. I know that they're easily able to get there, but they have to do some nasty, dirty things in order to get there. And so it's like everyone has to play a game to get a seat at the table, because that's what it entails. And so it's like that's what the structure does. It's like for you to have to play that game.
So let me ask you guys this question. Let's just say we stopped, the whole seat at their table conversation, and we created our own table. And at this table, we created ways for our people to create self-sufficient societies. With the current state, right, of our society that we actually live in, is there a seat at our table for white people?
I feel like it will be, because we're more accepting of anybody on the outside, because that's just who we are.
It's possible, but like, I have a total of 3 white friends, and it's because they all went through a probation period before I called them my friends.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like tangential to that question is like, can there be a white ally? And I feel like it's possible. It's just extremely difficult for them to get there, because they first have to realize that honestly, white people are at the root of most of the world's problems. As in, like, y'all populated smallpox. Like, just everything goes back to you. Like, you have to be acknowledgeable of that, and then be willing to give up all of that privilege that comes with it. And to the current point, obviously it can still happen. I haven't seen a lot of white people that are willing to do that, and that are willing to give up their privilege and pass it on to someone else that can then be used to dismantle the privileges that they enjoy. So, like, yeah, it's possible, but we might as well continue on pretending as if it's not
You don't
gonna
think that any sane individual?
I don't think it's a matter of sameness. I think it's just like, from what I've observed, it's like an innate resistance within a lot of the people. And not even talking about white people, you could say the same, like the same thing exists for cis people and people that are gender non-conforming. You can, like, the best cis ally is the one that wants to give up their privilege, and that's hard to literally do.
If you
On a
were
day-to-day
white, would you
basis.
give up your privilege to be an ally?
See, I don't even know, because first of all, you have to acknowledge the fact that you're white. Like,
If I was white, I'd probably.
And that you would have privilege.
yeah, and a lot of people don't want to do that, because then that means, well, I worked for my thing, so it,
But
like,
see, that, for me, like, that's why. For me, that's why I say, like, the whole FUBU mentality is because it's like, if I was white, I probably wouldn't give up my privilege to help your black ass either. Like, nigga, I got my privilege, I got my shit, and all right, life ain't fair, and that's okay. You know what I mean? And all right, I think that. What if we were like, yo, they're not gonna give up their privilege. I don't blame you. I probably wouldn't either. But that's exactly why I have to like not fuck with you and like build my own privileges. And I think that's across the board. Like, are we as oppressed people in many ways, right? Be it black, be it, you know what I mean, LGBT, be it woman. Like, are we going about equality the wrong way by asking people to give up their privileges to help us get privileges? You know what I'm saying? To have a privilege is kind of like, so like,
It's a privilege.
right, and a lot of times it's over another motherfucker. So like, are we going about our fight for equality the wrong way?
I don't think everyone does that. Like, I don't ask white people to do that for me. Like, or I guess I don't depend on white people to do that for she was like, if you have someone in your community, you know, who has privilege, like, you decide whether or not you're gonna struggle with them. And I feel like this is a political struggle, so like we're all gonna struggle with one another. And so it's like, if I have like a white person who I have a relationship with, and like I decide that like I'm not gonna put my energy into like trying to struggle with them because they don't want to acknowledge all of the things that they need to acknowledge in order for us to move forward and build autonomy, then like they can do their thing. I'm out. Like, but if they're gonna struggle with me, and if they're going to do all the things that you know need to be done, then like I don't like I'm not gonna say like I'm not gonna ask them to like please acknowledge your privilege because that's what you need to do in order for us to like win or whatever. Like,
because I don't think that that's what they need to do.
To like acknowledge all of that.
I honestly don't think they need to do anything. I think we need to do a lot of shit, and I think one of the first things we need to do is like probably cut their heads
No,
off.
they need to take responsibility.
No, because it's like we're
All
naming
right,
all
well,
these
if we
things
wait
because
for them
we
to
have
do that,
but
I'm not waiting for them to do that, but they need to do that.
like, what are you supposed to say?
I agree that like current state, like yes, I believe that like we as Black people or like just disenfranchised people need to continue working towards this goal, but like at the end of the day, we didn't create this problem. Like, white people do need to be involved in this because they created this issue. If we're talking about going to a seat at the table, I think we've all like confirmed that like white people are not going to let us at this metaphorical table before they kill us. But there are white people that are
without intentions to kill. Come sit.
But like, they only listen to other white people if we're going to be like dead ass about
So
this.
Jay-Z is in danger.
No, he got it.
He might be in danger.
No,
I don't
Beyonce
think
still
he-
love him.
I'm a knock on wood.
It's fine. It's fine.
They not
The
gonna-
Julia got Jay-Z covered. The Julia will keep him safe.
Who?
Beyonce's bodyguard is Julius. Therefore, they're the Julia.
You and y'all Beyonce craziness.
I'm sorry you don't like Love and Puppies and Beyonce.
I like Beyonce. I like her R&B records.
R&B record.
Let's not even go there. I think
Her
like
records are country records.
this conversation, there's so many angles to it,
So
right?
many.
And there's so much unpacking that still needs to happen because it's like even just listening to Gigi being like, yeah, they do need to do the things. What are the things? You know what I mean? And I think those things are like, it's not I don't think it's ever a definite set thing that needs to be done, if that makes sense. Like, there's some things that are set that like, yeah, everyone needs to kind of understand this, but everyone is at different places on their journey, whether it is in willfully being ignorant about their history, or like just being uncomfortable with being associated with the atrocities of their ancestors' legacy, whatever that may be. Like, people are all at different levels, so it looks different for everybody. But I do think that it is something that we need to start thinking about is what does reparations look like for us? Like, what does it mean? Because, yes, we don't need them to move the needle for us to be a part of the conversation. Because another conversation altogether, I feel like the needle that white people have is ridiculous. But so they don't have to move the needle in order for all of us to be a part of what is fair and equitable. But there does need to be an acknowledgement of we're not all starting at the same place. So you see like Forbes headlines like Kylie Jenner, self-made billionaire. As a black woman, as a black South African woman, that ain't self-made.
It's like nigga, you had a trust fund. You had
right. You know, you had
all
access to getting $1 million loan.
Yeah, you got it and you did what's right with it, but like I have to get it.
I got a small loan from my father to start my businesses. He got multiple millions of dollars in a loan from his father. Like, black people don't have that kind of economic equitable standing to be able to set up their kids and grandkids and great grandkids like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that needs to be acknowledged, and how reparations
And respected.
and reparations need to happen in
But
that
you know what?
regard.
So here's the thing about reparations, right? That I've been thinking about. Like, so like, of course everybody knows like that's the big conversation. Especially like, well, it was like they stopped talking about it like they always do, but amongst like presidential candidates, and it was like, yeah, what does reparations look like for black people? Should we give them that? Of course they should. But we as black people have to realize, if we accept reparations, we have to be willing to call this shit even.
Since when?
That's what you do when somebody if they give you reparations, that's a settlement.
No.
But listen, so let me finish making my point.
Don't give me $5.
Exactly.
Mad as hell.
So we gotta think, we gotta sit back and we gotta think about all the shit that let me finish. We gotta sit back and we gotta think about all the shit that we've been through, our ancestors been through over the past fucking 400 or 500 years, and say, what is it that they can give us for our generation and the generations to come after us to say, all right, we even. And the only thing that I can come up with was, nigga, we need half of everything, not money, but of this motherfucking country. It's laughable, right?
No, okay.
But what else
no.
equals that?
Let's walk down this path. So are we splitting it down like an imaginary Mason-Dixon line?
I don't know. I didn't think that deep.
Can we get
All I can
California
say-
in the deal? Like,
Caleb, where you at? Caleb,
we have
where
to
you
play
at?
Utah now? Like,
We need half. If
We
y'all
need
can't
more
make
than
that
half.
happen,
We
I
need
don't want
more
no
than half.
reparations.
We
need
need
more than half.
Because like anything less than
more than half.
I mean, but come on, white people, we be lucky we get half.
They can get a 4.
So again, we're expected to settle.
Right. So if we settle for anything less than half of this country, we playing ourselves. Bottom line.
John,
So-
get out of here.
All right, y'all.
I mean,
I'm making like.
I would love a new black republic and all that, but I also
Then-
don't think there is no reparation that's worth the 500 years you took from an entire culture. And it's not even just our culture.
Yeah.
You took it
But
from Native
You
Americans.
can't say shit like that because we got to get something out their ass.
That's true, but
Like, I don't want to be like, there's nothing you can do for me for all the hurt and pain, so leave me alone.
Okay,
Fuck
take
that,
out
nigga. Give me
reparations.
something.
I feel like reparations would have to happen on some like generational scale plan where like every year you have to promise that all of these black communities are going to see all of the growth that they should have seen in those times. Like, is it going to be like a 500-year point plan where they promise to like undo all of the steps they took in those 500 years? I feel like that would be worth it. Like,
Help us
I
create
think it's easier to
generational
get
wealth
half.
within our communities.
So
I feel
what
like
are
both
you-
of ours are just as difficult to get, to be honest.
I mean, yeah. What's this gonna say?
I guess my thing is, even if you get that half, what is stopping them from continuing to be who they are?
I don't know. It's hard.
He said we
I guess we in a pickle.
Pretty,
need a sports lawyer.
pretty much.
We trying to figure this shit out. But that's why I say, like, the whole reparations conversation is really just like, let's give these niggas some shit to get excited about. But like, they ain't really ready to do that shit. Because like, look at the people who like the people who there, and like to make it all make sense, to tie it back into like what this whole episode is about. The people at the table talking about reparations, are they really talking about some shit that's like really gonna like repair and be equal to the amount of pain that like we ain't have to go through this shit that our ancestors had to go through?
No one.
I mean, we still going through it
Just
right
no
today.
politician.
Just in different ways from what our ancestors did.
Yeah, but what
Look
I'm,
at the generational curses.
yeah, this
We
is
still
true.
going through that.
Like generational
It's
trauma
been passed
literally
down to
runs
us.
in your
Yeah,
DNA.
that trauma, things that we go through now, dealing with police mentality, our communities, like all these different streets that had success, the supposed to be successful black business. Now those are out. Like, look at all those streets with abandoned buildings that used to be black businesses. Like, we still going through that.
Mm-hmm.
It's being passed down to us.
This is true.
So I mean, not just 500 years. I mean 500 plus years, because we still going through it today.
Yeah, and with reparations, it's not going to change half of the mentality. Like, it's a mentality.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately who they are, and it's been passed down and passed down. And yeah, it was probably like worse back in the day, because we hadn't gained like the power that we have now. And it's not like we have much, but we've gained some. But it's still like, it's like, okay, give me half, and then years or centuries later, it's gonna be like, I need some more reparations because you fucked up again. Like, at what point, like, it's changing the mentality of the people in general, and how do you do that?
And who said they would change things up to where that half won't even matter anymore?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's the basis of our conversation, right? Like, is a seat at the table what we really want, right? Because, you know, there's like I said when we started the conversation, we have this group of people saying like, yo, for us, by us, fuck them, let's create our own, you know, self-sufficient, sustainable societies and shit like that. And then you have the percentage of us who are saying, look, we're a nation within a nation. We need to work within their system and get whatever we can get to filter throughout our communities, you know? It boils back down to that, like, is a seat at the table what we really need?
If that means
Or-
ownership, yes.
Well, then you have to decide that for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Do we need a seat at the table, or do we need to create our own table? Like, and if so, how do we do both? You know what I mean? Like, either one. How do we? What does a real seat at the table look like, and how do we sit at that table? You know what I'm saying? And if we create our own table, how do we create that table? You know what I mean? Like, what tools, what material are we gonna utilize to even make this table? And I'm speaking so literal, but it's really metaphorical.
I feel like in certain ways, black people do already have their own table. Like, within our own culture, there are people that we all listen to. There are things that we all share that already exist. I feel like the table for black people exists. I feel like the question, at least for me, in the way that I view it, is how we make that table powerful enough to affect change outside of the table that we're currently sitting at. Because I feel like black people do respect each other and respect our like combined leadership when we do see it. We have certain, like, we don't agree on everything obviously, but there are certain things that we're all like, okay, yeah, Black Lives Matter for that. This is for that. That already exists in certain ways, and I feel like we are strong as fuck in that we like have continued to organize and reorganize and fight again for the things that we want. And the issue that we've come across is like that glass ceiling of accessing outside of that, of like, we have all of these strong things, we have all these grassroots organizations, how do we amplify them and make the other table that's oppressing our table listen? And now I'm thinking about us sitting in the house of cafeteria, but that's the point.
Yeah.
We need to get to Regina George.
All right, y'all. So we have come to the conclusion of this episode. You know, like any other classic Black Group Therapy episode, we start off a little rocky, but we always end up in love and closer and just like figuring with a little bit more clarity of how we feel about things. So like, I want to thank you guys for being here. And I also want to give you all the opportunity to shout out y'all social media, so that, because people want to know who you are and follow you and like probably send you a message talking about how wrong or right you were. So starting with you, Princess, what is your social media?
You can follow me on Instagram at Princess Be Painting, and it's all spelled phonetically, like just how it sounds. And I'm on Twitter at IM_princess. That's my government name. Literally, my parents named me Princess India.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All social media platforms at its_the can.
Yes. I am John the author. I am the rapper who sat by the door. You can follow me on Instagram at John_the author.
I'm Gigi. Instagram is what I use most frequently. GIGI_606. Also, side note, follow our blog. I'm doing a project with folks in Chile, so follow Chicago_Chile to know what's happening politically over there.
Dope.
Sylvia, follow Facebook, Instagram, the Loop 2150.
Dope. And we want to shout out to Loop 2150 for allowing us to use their amazing space. And this is Black Group Therapy, yo. We out.